The most valuable private company in the world just showed up at someone's door, demanding answers. They wanted names, every former employee who'd spoken out, every congressional office that had been contacted, every potential investor who'd been warned. Tyler was just one of many advocates suddenly being targeted by OpenAI, and what they were trying to hide would make even the most cynical Silicon Valley observers' jaw drop. Because on Friday, January 16, 2026, OpenAI admitted defeat in the most public way possible. They announced advertisements in ChatGPT. For any normal startup, this would be unremarkable, maybe even expected. But for OpenAI, the company that promised to democratize artificial intelligence and benefit all of humanity, it was an admission that the emperor had no clothes. And here's the thing that makes this absolutely fascinating. Those aren't my words. They're Sam Altman's own words from October 2024. He literally said, "I kind of think of ads as like a last resort for us for a business model. I would do it if it meant that was the only way to get everybody in the world access to great services. But if we can find something that doesn't do that, I'd prefer that." Last resort. His words. So after hundreds of billions of dollars in investment, after promises of curing cancer and revolutionizing every industry on Earth, after taking 40% of all the RAM on the planet and causing environmental and economic problems across the globe, we're watching OpenAI resort to the business model of a free Android app. And there's a sizable section of people who would absolutely love to see this company go down in flames. If things continue the way they're heading, they just might get their wish. There's serious talk of bankruptcy by 2027. Former Fidelity asset manager George Noble put it bluntly. "I've watched companies implode for decades. This one has all the warning signs." But what's really happening behind the closed doors at OpenAI goes far beyond just financial trouble. Internal documents reveal a company in crisis, bleeding $12 billion in a single quarter, watching traffic fall for a full year straight, losing their biggest partnerships to competitors, and desperately trying to silence anyone who dares to speak the truth about what's really going on. What you're about to hear is the story of how the most hyped company in modern tech history is potentially facing its own extinction event. And the warning signs were there all along if you knew where to look. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. Because the OpenAI story isn't just about one company's rise and potential fall. It's about the biggest gamble in Silicon Valley history and what happens when the math stops working. When ChatGPT launched in December 2022, it was nothing short of a cultural earthquake. The technology seemed almost magical. You could have conversations with an AI that appeared genuinely intelligent. It could write essays, debug code, explain complex concepts. Within days, it became the fastest-growing consumer application in history. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, became Silicon Valley's newest prophet. He wasn't just promising a better chatbot. He was promising to automate the entire economy, cure diseases, solve climate change, achieve artificial general intelligence that could do anything a human could do, but better. The money poured in, hundreds of billions of dollars. Microsoft bet the farm on OpenAI, investing $13 billion and integrating ChatGPT into everything from Bing to Office. The company's valuation skyrocketed to over $150 billion, making it the most valuable private company on Earth. But here's what nobody was talking about in those early euphoric months. The entire business model was built on a hypothesis, a scientific bet. And that bet was called scaling laws. Now, I need you to understand this concept because it's the foundation of everything that's happening right now. It's the reason billions got invested, and it's the reason those billions might evaporate. The scaling law hypothesis said this: if you make AI models bigger, give them more computing power and more data, they get proportionally smarter. Not just a little better, exponentially better. And this wasn't just theory, they had evidence. In 2017, researchers at Google discovered a new architecture for building AI models called transformers. This made it possible for language models to generate long, coherent text. That was breakthrough number 1. Then came breakthrough number 2. In 2020, a researcher at OpenAI named Jared Kaplan, working with a team that included Dario Amodei, who would later become CEO of Anthropic, ran a simple experiment. They took GPT-2 and just made it bigger. Much bigger. This seemed obvious, but it actually defied decades of conventional wisdom in machine learning. The traditional thinking was that if you made a model too large, it would just memorize the training data and fail when you gave it new examples. It would overfit, it would break. But Kaplan's team found the opposite. The bigger the model got, the better it performed, and not just marginally better, dramatically better. They drew a curve through their data points and extrapolated it forward, and that curve went up fast, really fast. This is what triggered the frenzy. Because if that curve was right, if it held true, then GPT-5 or GPT-6 would be artificial general intelligence. It would be able to do anything a human could do, and they might only be 5 years away. The normies, the general public, didn't understand what was happening yet. But inside Silicon Valley, people were going absolutely insane. This was the new gold rush. Whoever won this race would control the economy. So OpenAI built GPT-3. They made it 15 times bigger than GPT-2, and the performance jump validated everything. The scaling laws worked. The curve was real. 4 months after releasing ChatGPT, which was just GPT-3 tamed for public consumption, they released GPT-4. And it leaped up the curve exactly as predicted. Another massive jump forward, right on schedule. Sam Altman told his team this technology scared him. He told investors that the next version would blow away GPT-4, that they were about to go through the looking glass into something unprecedented. And then they built GPT-5. They called the project Orion. They constructed even bigger data centers, trained an even more massive model. By summer 2024, it was ready. This was supposed to be the moment everything changed, but when they tested Orion, something was wrong. It was only slightly better than GPT-4, not the exponential leap they'd predicted, not the revolution they'd promised investors. The scaling laws had broken. Right around GPT-4, the curve flattened out. Just making models bigger and feeding them more data wasn't producing exponential improvements anymore. And this is where the real problems for OpenAI began. Because 75% of the longest-standing, most respected AI researchers had always believed you couldn't just scale your way to intelligence, that there were fundamental limitations to current AI architectures. Mathematical ceilings you couldn't break through just by adding more computers. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine a father saying, "My son was born just 10 months ago. In that time, he's gone from crawling to walking, and recently he started running. In 2 years, little Timmy is definitely going to be able to fly." Obviously, that's absurd. There are biological limitations to human capabilities. You can't extrapolate early developmental milestones into superpowers. But that's exactly what OpenAI had done with their scaling projections. They'd seen explosive early growth and assumed it would continue forever. And they'd made trillion-dollar commitments based on that assumption. Now here's where it gets truly devastating for OpenAI's business model. Every AI company faces this scaling problem, but OpenAI is uniquely vulnerable to it. Google, Anthropic, even the open-source Chinese models, they're all hitting similar walls. But Google has $86 billion in profit in 9 months. They can afford to keep experimenting, keep trying new approaches, keep funding research until they find the next breakthrough. OpenAI, on the other hand, is burning cash at a rate that would make a defense contractor blush. The numbers are staggering when you actually look at them. Internal documents seen by the information reveal a financial picture that should terrify anyone who's invested in this company. Setting aside the lawsuits, and there are many, including a $134 billion suit from Elon Musk, the core business numbers tell a story of catastrophic cash burn. In 2026, OpenAI will lose $14 billion. That's 3 times worse than their estimates from early 2025. They expect their first profit, $14 billion in 2029. But to get there, they'll have to lose $44 billion first. By some analyst estimates, they'll be completely out of money by 2027. Now, let me put this in perspective. OpenAI brings in about $13 billion per year in recurring revenue. That's actually impressive for a young company. But here's the insane part. They've committed to spending over $1 trillion on AI data center infrastructure over the next 8 years. $1 trillion. That means they're promising to spend money at a rate that's 100 times what they're currently bringing in. They've also agreed to pay Oracle $60 billion per year starting in 2027. And somehow, in the middle of all this, OpenAI predicts they'll hit $100 billion in revenue by 2029. That's close to what NVIDIA makes, and NVIDIA sells the actual physical hardware that everyone needs. Is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. Is it likely? Investors are starting to have doubts. Blue Owl Capital recently pulled out of a $10 billion deal to fund an Oracle OpenAI data center in Michigan. That's not a good sign. When major institutional investors start backing away from deals, it usually means they've seen something in the books they don't like, something that makes them doubt the company's ability to pay them back. From all sides, and they're running out of money to fight back. But what really makes this situation almost darkly comedic is looking back at what Sam Altman said in the early days. Back in 2015, when OpenAI was still a nonprofit, he gave an interview where he was asked about revenue. His answer? The honest truth is, we have no idea. We have never made any revenue. We have no current plans to make revenue. We have no idea how we may one day generate revenue. We have made a soft promise to investors that once we've built this generally intelligent system, we will ask it to figure out a way to generate an investment return for you. Read that again. Their business plan was literally build God-level AI, then ask it how to make money. That's not a business plan, that's a prayer. And now, after pivoting from nonprofit to for-profit, after raising hundreds of billions, after making trillion-dollar infrastructure commitments, they're resorting to advertisements. The last resort, in Sam's own words. But the financial problems are only part of the story, because there's something even more corrosive happening to OpenAI, something that money can't fix. They're losing the trust of the very people they need most, the researchers, the developers, the advocates, the users who believed in the original mission. And when you lose trust in Silicon Valley, when people start questioning whether you're lying, the money dries up fast, because venture capital runs on hype and belief, and both require trust. Let me walk you through Sam Altman's track record because it's illuminating. His first company was Looped, founded in 2005. It was a GPS-based social network, kind of strange even for that era. Sam claimed they had 50,000 users. Impressive for a startup, except they didn't have 50,000 users. They had 500 users. He'd inflated the numbers by a factor of 100, but he still sold the company for millions. In 2014, he became president of Y Combinator and joined Reddit's board. OpenAI scraped Reddit's entire website to feed into their training data. In return, Sam promised to give 10% of OpenAI's value back to the Reddit community. That never happened. Ilya Sutskever, one of OpenAI's co-founders and one of the most respected researchers in the field, has accused Sam of a consistent pattern of lying. According to multiple inside sources, Sam lied to OpenAI's board members repeatedly before being fired in November 2023. Of course, he managed to get reinstated days later after threatening to take the entire company to Microsoft. But the fact remains, his own board, people who worked with him daily, felt he was dishonest enough to warrant firing. So with this track record, is Sam Altman the person who's going to deliver trillions in value? Is he the guy who's going to responsibly steward humanity's transition to artificial general intelligence? A lot of people are starting to doubt it, and that doubt is manifesting in increasingly aggressive behavior from OpenAI toward critics. Remember the beginning of this story? OpenAI representatives showing up at people's doors, demanding to know who they'd spoken to, asking for names of every former employee, every congressional office, every potential investor that critics had contacted. This is the behavior of a company that's scared, really scared, because they know that if the truth gets out, if people understand the financial situation and the technical limitations and the pattern of overpromising, the whole house of cards could collapse. The company that started as a non-profit meant to benefit humanity has become a for-profit behemoth that intimidates whistleblowers. In 2022, I was in Melbourne and watched Sam Altman give a talk. Afterward, he was swarmed by crowds of people wanting photos with him. He was treated like a tech messiah. Today, the sentiment couldn't be more different. The internet is filled with former believers who feel betrayed. Developers who built on OpenAI's platform and then had the rug pulled out from under them when pricing changed or features disappeared. Researchers who joined the company because of its non-profit mission and quit when it pivoted to pure profit maximization. Users who trusted the company with their data and then discovered it was being used in ways they never consented to. This erosion of trust compounds every other problem OpenAI faces. When your technology plateaus, you need brilliant researchers to discover new breakthroughs. But brilliant researchers don't want to work for a company they don't trust. When your finances are shaky, you need investors willing to bet on your long-term vision. But investors don't write checks to CEOs with credibility problems. When your market share is declining, you need users to stick with your product out of loyalty. But loyalty requires trust, and OpenAI is running out of all three: researchers, investors, and user loyalty. Meanwhile, they're making increasingly desperate moves that signal just how bad things have gotten internally. There's the floundering attempt to spend $6.4 billion acquiring Jony Ive's design firm to build an AI hardware device. According to multiple reports, that development is going poorly. It could end up like the Humane AI pin, one of the most spectacular product failures in recent tech history. There's the AI erotica version of ChatGPT, which is self-explanatory and absolutely reeks of desperation. There's the Sora app, their text-to-video product that was supposed to revolutionize content creation. It's reportedly losing $15 million per day, and its user base has collapsed after an initial surge of curiosity. Most recently, they launched a translator app. A translator app. After promising to cure cancer and achieve superintelligence, they're competing with Google Translate. None of this is the behavior of a healthy company with a clear strategy. This is throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. This is trying to find any revenue stream, no matter how small or off-brand, to offset the hemorrhaging cash. And all of this is happening while Sam Altman still has to talk a big game publicly, because the moment he admits the truth, the moment he says we're struggling, we don't know if scaling laws will work again, we might not achieve AGI on the timeline we promised, the investment dries up completely, so he's trapped. He has to keep promising the moon while delivering translator apps. He has to keep claiming they're on the verge of breakthrough after breakthrough, while the technology demonstrably stagnates. He has to keep projecting confidence while the market share crumbles and the bank account empties. Let me show you just how bad the technical stagnation has gotten with a real example. Someone asked ChatGPT, "I need to wash my car and the car wash is 100 meters away. Should I walk or drive?" ChatGPT responded, "Honestly, 100 meters is barely a stroll. It'll take just a minute or two on foot, unless you've got heavy gear or there's something unusual going on. Walking is probably the simplest and most pleasant choice. Plus, you'll save a little gas and get a tiny bit of fresh air." Seems reasonable, right? The user followed up, "All right, so, you think I should walk to the car wash instead of driving my car there?" ChatGPT, "That's what I'd do. It's a short jaunt and it'll probably be less hassle than starting the car just for that distance." Then the user asked, "All right, so how do I wash my car if I walk there?" ChatGPT, "You'll just bring what you need, maybe a small bag with your payment method, and the car wash will have everything else. Once you get there, they'll handle the washing while you wait." And finally, the user asked the obvious question. "So, my question is, how will the car get washed if the car is still at my house?" There was a pause. Then ChatGPT responded, "I see what you mean now. If the car stays at home, it's not getting any cleaner, right? So yes, to actually wash it, you'll need to bring the car along. In that case, driving those 100 meters makes perfect sense." This is a system that can solve high-level physics and mathematics problems, that can write sophisticated code, that can pass the bar exam. But it doesn't have a basic model of how the physical world works. It doesn't understand that to wash a car, the car needs to be at the car wash. This is massive layoffs and abandoning most of their ambitious projects. They become a much smaller company focused on a few profitable niches. Maybe they maintain ChatGPT as an ad-supported product and license their technology to enterprise customers. It's not the world-changing outcome they promised, but it's survival. This is actually the most likely scenario in my view. Scenario 3. There's a genuine breakthrough. Someone at OpenAI or one of their competitors discovers a new architecture or training method that restarts the scaling laws. Suddenly, the exponential improvement returns, and whoever makes that breakthrough wins the next decade of AI. This is possible, but the odds get longer every month. The longer we go without a breakthrough, the more it looks like we're hitting fundamental limitations rather than temporary plateaus. Scenario 4, and this is the darkest timeline. OpenAI becomes a zombie company. They have just enough revenue to service their debts and keep the lights on, but not enough to innovate or compete. They exist in this weird limbo state, with the market assuming they'll either get acquired or go bankrupt eventually, but somehow neither happens. They just slowly fade into irrelevance while burning through whatever investment they can still attract. This would be the most painful outcome because it would drag on for years. The question isn't really whether OpenAI survives in its current form. The question is how the implosion happens and who gets hurt when it does. Because there will be casualties beyond just the company itself. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. Many of them are brilliant researchers who joined because they believed in the mission and could have been doing important work elsewhere. Investors will lose billions, maybe hundreds of billions. Some of them are massive institutions that can absorb the loss, but some are smaller funds that bet big on AI being the next internet. The AI industry as a whole will face a credibility crisis. If the most hyped, most valuable AI company can't make the economics work, what does that say about everyone else? We could see a broader crash in AI valuations, making it harder for legitimate companies to raise money. Companies and developers that built on OpenAI's platform will be left scrambling. If ChatGPT's quality degrades or the API pricing becomes unsustainable or the company gets acquired and everything changes, There are hundreds of businesses that will have to rebuild from scratch. And perhaps most significantly, public trust in AI as a transformative technology will take a major hit. We've already seen this cycle before with crypto, with the metaverse, with every overhyped tech trend that promised to change the world and didn't. If OpenAI fails spectacularly, it'll make people skeptical of the next wave of genuine innovations. It'll make it harder for researchers doing serious work to get funding and attention because everyone will remember this as another Silicon Valley grift. That might be the real tragedy here. Not that one company failed, but that their failure poisons the well for everyone else. Let me bring this back to the bigger picture because the OpenAI story isn't really about one company. It's about a pattern that keeps repeating in tech. A genuinely impressive technology gets discovered. In this case, large language models and transformers. A company takes that technology and makes extraordinary promises about what it will achieve. They promise to change everything, to create trillions in value, to solve humanity's biggest problems. Vast amounts of money pour in based on those promises. Billions, hundreds of billions, eventually trillions in total investment across the industry. The initial results are impressive enough to keep the hype going. ChatGPT's launch was genuinely remarkable. GPT-4 was a real leap forward. But then the technology hits limitations. The easy gains are captured, and the hard problems remain hard. The exponential curve flattens. The returns diminish. The company is now trapped. They've made trillion-dollar commitments based on exponential growth that's no longer happening. They can't admit the truth without triggering collapse, so they have to keep promising. Breakthroughs are just around the corner. Desperation sets in. They start chasing any revenue stream, no matter how off-brand. They cut costs. They make aggressive moves against critics. The original mission gets abandoned in favor of pure survival. Eventually, reality catches up. The money runs out, or the market loses patience, or a competitor who wasn't carrying as much baggage just builds something better. We saw this exact pattern with WeWork, with Theranos, with FTX, with countless dot-com companies in the late 90s. Impressive idea, extraordinary promises, massive investment, initial success, hidden problems, desperation, collapse. The only variable is how long each stage takes and how much money gets burned in the process. OpenAI might be further along this curve than most people realize. The desperation phase is clearly here. The question is, how far away collapse is? And look, I want to be clear. I'm not rooting for OpenAI to fail. Thousands of people work there, many of them doing genuinely interesting research. The technology itself, despite its limitations, is useful for many applications. But the hype, the promises, the financial structure, the pattern of behavior from leadership, all of it points toward a company that's fundamentally unsustainable in its current form. The most likely outcome is that the valuable pieces get absorbed by larger companies with sustainable business models, while the hype and the extraordinary promises fade away. ChatGPT will probably still exist in 5 years, but it'll be a Microsoft product or a feature in Google search, not the flagship of a company valued at $150 billion. The researchers will scatter to universities and other companies, where they'll continue pushing the boundaries of what AI can do, just without the weight of impossible expectations. And Sam Altman will probably land on his feet, because people like Sam Altman always do. He'll write a book about lessons learned, give TED Talks about the future of AI, maybe start another company with a new set of promises. The pattern will repeat. So what should you take away from this story? First, be extremely skeptical of anyone promising exponential technological improvement. Without clear evidence, the trend will continue. Early exponential growth is common. Sustained exponential growth is virtually impossible. Second, understand that in tech, The business model matters more than the technology. Lots of companies have impressive technology and still fail because they can't figure out how to make money. OpenAI has good technology, but their path to profitability requires either trillion-dollar infrastructure bets paying off or breakthrough discoveries that may never come. Third, pay attention to how companies treat critics and whistleblowers. When a company starts sending representatives to people's doors, demanding to know who they've talked to, that's not the behavior of a confident organization. That's fear. Fourth, track record matters. When someone has a pattern of overpromising and under-delivering, of inflating numbers and breaking commitments, believe the pattern. Don't bet on them suddenly becoming honest. And finally, remember that no company is too big or too hyped to fail. The most valuable private company in the world, with hundreds of billions in investment and partnerships with the biggest tech companies on Earth, can still run out of money and collapse if the fundamentals don't work. OpenAI's story is still being written. Maybe they'll pull off a miracle. Maybe someone will discover the next breakthrough and save the company. Maybe I'm wrong about all of this, and they'll hit $100 billion in revenue by 2029 and achieve artificial general intelligence by 2030. But based on everything we know right now, based on the financial data and the technical limitations and the market dynamics and the leadership track record, that seems extremely unlikely. What seems more likely is that we're watching the beginning of the end, a slow-motion collapse that will take months or years to fully play out, but that's already inevitable. The warning signs are all there. $12 billion quarterly losses, declining market share,